Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer and unpack the fascinating psychology behind why the most secure people out there, they're often the quietest. We live in a world that literally constantly tells us to shout about our achievements, right? We're supposed to build our personal brands, hustle, and make sure everyone knows exactly how great we are. But psychology and human behavior tell a remarkably different story about what true emotional intelligence actually looks like.
Have you ever noticed this? The most confident person in the room is sometimes the one trying the absolute least to impress anyone. It completely challenges our basic assumptions about self-assurance. Because, let's face it, we often confuse being loud with being confident. But think about it for a second. The person who just sits back, listens intently, and doesn't scramble to highlight their resume in every single casual chat, they have this magnetic sort of gravity. They possess an internal anchor that just doesn't require constant applause to stay grounded.
So let's start by breaking down the myth of proving yourself. On one hand, we have normal, healthy validation. Look, we're social creatures. If you do a great job at work, wanting your manager to say, hey, great job, is a perfectly biological, totally healthy desire for recognition. But on the other hand, we have unhelpful dependence. This is where if you don't get that praise, your entire sense of self-worth just crumbles. The crucial point here is recognizing exactly when that natural desire crosses the line into a daily requirement just to feel worthy. Moving right along, let's talk about escaping the approval trap. When you establish strong internal values, the psychology actually shows you naturally become way less dependent on external validation. Basically, internal confidence is an inside job. It means you have a built-in compass. You know what you value, you know what good work looks like to you, and you fully trust your own assessment of your character. You aren't constantly outsourcing your self-esteem to the people around you. Think about how this applies to something as simple as your Friday night plans. Imagine you decide to stay in to work on a personal passion project instead of going to some trendy social event where you could be seen and noticed. The externally dependent person, they're going to feel super anxious about missing out on the social points. But the internally confident person knows the value of their time and completely owns their choice. They validate their own choices first, period. Now, let's explore the power of not knowing. Okay, so intellectual humility. It's essentially ego-free intelligence. It proves that quiet, confident people aren't necessarily superior. They just aren't afraid of their own blind spots. It's understanding that no matter how smart you are, you don't have a monopoly on good ideas. And honestly, more importantly, you don't feel that sudden, horrible spike of panic when someone asks you a question outside your area of expertise. Imagine a colleague saying, I actually don't know the answer to that. Let's find out together. It instantly diffuses tension, right? The insecure response is to bluff, to throw around jargon, basically to spin an answer out of thin air because the ego just cannot handle being perceived as unknowing. But saying I don't know with total comfort, that strongly signals that your worth isn't tied to being a human encyclopedia. So rather than faking it, you can handle the unknown using these 3 simple steps. First, just pause. This stops that nervous reflex to babble. Second, openly admit your lack of knowledge. Vulnerability is honestly the ultimate show of strength here. And finally, offer to collaborate to find the answer. You instantly pivot the situation from a personal failing into teamwork. You're not losing face at all. You're inviting partnership. Next up, we're looking at actions over constant explanations. There's this really stark contrast between the anxiety of over-explaining yourself and the peaceful power of just letting your results speak. You see, over-explaining is a defense mechanism. It's a way of constantly trying to convince others of your methods, basically shouting, please see how hard I'm working, please validate my effort. Letting your actions do the talking is a much more profound display of trust in your own competence. Secure individuals simply do not need real-time, step-by-step validation. They don't need a play-by-play announcer for their workday. Try stepping back during your next task, holding your tongue, and letting the quality of what you produce be your only explanation. This doesn't mean hiding your light under a bushel, not at all. It just means trusting that high-quality work eventually becomes its own megaphone. Now, let's shift gears to how disagreements aren't identity threats. When you tie your ego to an argument, an attack on your idea feels like an attack on your soul. And that is exactly why people get so defensive and hostile. They feel this overwhelming need to win at all costs because they see disagreement as a literal threat. But when you're driven by confidence, separating your identity from your ideas turns a disagreement from a threat into an exploration. You view ideas objectively. You focus entirely on the need to understand rather than the need to win. And the good news is you can actively train yourself to ensure a disagreement never feels like a personal challenge. It starts with genuinely listening fully to the opposing viewpoint, rather than just silently waiting for your turn to speak. The real magic happens when you detach your core identity from the topic. Visualize just putting the idea on a table between you and the other person. If they poke holes in the idea, they aren't poking holes in you. You are then completely free to respond to the idea, not the person.
Finally, let's talk about the focus on real personal growth. Prioritizing your own actual development over performing for a crowd is really the absolute foundation of true emotional intelligence. Think about it. When your goal is just to impress others, you're playing a game where the rules constantly change based on whoever happens to be watching. But when your goal is personal growth, you set the rules. You become the judge of your own progress. You're competing against who you were yesterday, not against the person sitting next to you.
So, to quickly summarize this explainer, these are the 5 evidence-based pillars of quiet confidence that really emphasize knowing your own value. We've seen that it's totally normal to want some recognition, but relying on it is a massive trap. We've learned that admitting what you don't know is a flex of true intelligence. We've seen how quiet actions drown out loud explanations, and how detaching your ego from your ideas makes you practically bulletproof in a debate. And all of this is anchored by valuing internal growth over external approval.
Because real confidence isn't about convincing everyone around you that you're capable. It's about trusting your own value. So I'll leave you with this. What is one area today where you can step into your own quiet confidence? Maybe it's holding back from over-explaining an email, or maybe it's finally just admitting, I don't know, in a meeting. Whatever it is, take that step. You really don't need to prove anything to anyone. And realizing that, it's the most powerful thing you can do.